Pagan Min.
Pagan means
Pagan Min.
Pagan Min.
Pagan Min is an intimidating yet charming character. When we are first introduced to Pagan, we see his calm yet agitated demeanor quickly turn vicious. But this is followed by him immediately showing warmth to our character, Ajay Ghale. Throughout the course of Far Cry 4, we learn why he behaves this way, and I've heard others say that he's kind of less of a villain because of this, that he's one to be given compassion to because he is somewhat kind to us. But come on, your experiences with somebody isn't all there is to them. So today we're hoping to uncover certain things like that. We're going to look into his story, who he is, the origins of the Golden Path, and why he is their enemy. In this exploration, I really hope to distinguish the Pagan Min that we kind of get to know from Ajay Ghale's perspective, and who he is as a person and as a leader. Let's begin with a look into Pagan Min's backstory. We learned from a Game Informer blog post preceding Far Cry 4's release that Pagan isn't actually the character's name, but rather Gang Min. He was born in 1966 and he is the son of a mid-level drug boss in Hong Kong, and his mother was a British expatriate. As Gang, Pagan, grew up, he worked for his father but had larger ambitions. He viewed his father as a relic of the past and thought it was time to change. Far Cry 4's narrative director Mark Thompson commented, "Pagan was a bit of an outsider to his father. Always a bit of a peacock, more flamboyant than his father was comfortable with." So between viewing his father as outdated and a hindrance to progress, he also was looked at with disapproving eyes from his father. Something else that's mentioned in this article is because of Pagan, Gang Min's mixed heritage, his father experienced a great deal of shame among the criminal elite. This only adds to the inadequacies he saw in his father's view of him. I mention all of this because as we look into the next bit of his past, we learn that his father was killed. In the Far Cry 6 DLC titled Control, it's depicted as Pagan killing him, saying, But with this DLC, there is a little bit of debate on if it's what actually happened, or if it's just kind of all in Pagan's head as he wrestles with these thoughts and interpretations of his past and all that stuff. But whether he killed him or not, once his father was killed, it's noted that Gang, Pagan, took on the name Pagan Min after the Burmese king, as he didn't want to say that he killed his father, but he wanted to name himself after a man who did. In Volume 2 of the Far Cry Rite of Passage comic books, we see that Pagan celebrates his father's death alongside his adopted sister Yuma. He parties and basically toasts to a new beginning. The dinosaurs are dead, now there's new life. Quickly after though, he is targeted by his own people and by the other drug lords as they try to kill him, and he flees Hong Kong to a neighboring country, Kyrat. Kyrat was in the midst of a civil war, and Pagan felt that he could be their country's savior. So he began a bloody siege. He formed an army, murdered the heir to the throne, and ended the royal bloodline. He then remarked that history will not remember how he took this power, but only what he did with it and how long he kept it. In his claiming of the throne in an interview with Shack News, Thompson says that Min and his royal army had an antagonism that created a rebel faction, the Golden Path. We'll get into a little bit more of that in a bit. But it's noted in the Game Informer magazine too that this royal army that Pagan has led and brought to power corrupted existing businesses and infrastructure, and the treasury and national reserves of Kyrat were then boosted by the heroin trade. Mohan Ghale opposes this corruption and antagonism and founds the Golden Path to fight back with tactful guerrilla skirmishes and strategic attacks. After the failures and the stagnation of the Golden Path's effort, Mohan sends his wife, Ishwari, to spy on Pagan. Pagan falls in love with her, she brings her child, Ajay, to him, and he treats her with warmth. They begin an affair, and she has a child, Lakshmana. The child is Pagan's daughter. In the Far Cry 6 DLC, we discovered different journal entries from Ishwari that kind of document some of the events that lead to where we find Pagan in Far Cry 4. Firstly, Ishwari writes that she trusts Pagan with her life and her children's lives. So we see a bit of that forming trust and that forming relationship that they have. And the timeline isn't very clear, but years later we get an additional journal entry and we see that Mohan has found out about the affair. But in her journal, Ishwari comments that she doesn't want to turn to Pagan as he's let her down even more than Mohan. By the way, we do learn all of this, minus Ishwari's thoughts, in the context of Far Cry 4's story. But I'm including these here as Ishwari kind of comments on Pagan's nature and some of his personality that I feel is important to include when talking of who he is and evaluating his character. But she writes a fourth journal entry that Pagan and Mohan are the same, violent, obsessed with war, obsessed with power. From this point, Mohan kills Lakshmana, exclaiming that he will not give Pagan an heir. And in the final journal entry that we find in the Control DLC, Ishwari writes that she sees everything now. She never loved Pagan, she just wanted the rebellion. She thought she was taking control of her life, but she was just playing into his hands and giving him everything that he wanted. So she's enabling him. But she then comments that she's going to take control now, and she's going to make Mohan pay. From here, we know that Ishwari kills Mohan and flees with Ajay to America. Years later, she's sick, dies, and has Ajay return to Karat to spread her ashes with Lakshmana. And this is the exact moment that we begin to interact with Pagan. So all of this is what we know of him before and kind of during Far Cry 4. But what does this say about his personality? Well, for one, the DLC is named Control for a reason, and looking at the things we just talked about, we can see that he is a man obsessed with power. Before Pagan kills his father, he states, "What's the point of being powerful if you can't do whatever you want?" He views power as the enabling factor to allow him to enjoy the vices he is enamored with. Ishwari even notes this in her journal entries. Pagan and Mohan are the same, obsessed with war, obsessed with power. She says she is the result of his hunger for power. She's the prize, the possession. She also says that she enabled his pursuit by just playing into his hands, letting him have the prize. So she feels that she is the enabler to this obsession with power. It's implied that Pagan has learned of Ishwari's feelings of him as you play as him in the DLC and you find these journal entries, but he still shows warmth as he interacts with Ajay. I feel like there could be a few takes on why this is, one of which just simply being that he truly loved Ishwari, and Ajay being the only thing remaining of her and of that time in his life creates that comfort he aches to still have. The other take I'm wondering about, though, is this idea of an heir to his throne. A display of power in many mentalities would be through one's lineage, a continuation of your legacy, either through blood or rule, a way to continue on once mortality creeps in. Having Lakshmana gave him this, and in the culture of Karat, she likely would have been the Taran Matara, if you want to see that potential as being power rewarding, but he doesn't seem to fully respect their culture, so I don't know if that's even valid. But regardless, this potential lineage was ended when Mohan killed Lakshmana. Ajay's return renewed that hope of continuing on, an unofficial stepson to pass the power to. As I continue evaluating this, I do question more though. Either way, this is just some theories about his approach to Ajay, but there's a whole rebel movement against the guy, so there's got to be more to him. More that he's done, and more that warrants consideration to take when evaluating what drives him. Obviously, throughout the story of Far Cry 4, we do see him destroy temples and build statues of himself out of solid gold. But to continue what I mentioned earlier, the Golden Path was started because Pagan betrayed the Royalist army. Back when Pagan had fled to Karat, he joined the Royalist army to fight against the Nationalists in the First Civil War. The Royal Army stormed the palace and attempted to crown their young heir to the throne. Pagan, however, killed the kid and took the throne for himself, quickly purging the Royalist leadership and his opponents. This betrayal is what led to the Second Civil War that we find ourselves in during the events of Far Cry 4. So, kind of bringing it all together. What we've learned of him is he controlled drug rings, potentially killed his father, and murdered a child to seize control of Karat. And that all happened before he took control. How about after? Well, he killed families for harboring the Golden Path, or just because they disagreed with him. He also kidnapped and killed Noor's family, but didn't tell her that they were dead. He actually continued telling her that they were alive so that she would keep working for him. He also started a slave workforce in the mines, kidnapped women and sent them to brothels. He directed the Golden Path to kill Yuma, his adopted sister, likely because he was just getting annoyed by her obsession with karate myths. He also kidnapped a celebrity chef to be his personal chef, but then had him killed because Ajay didn't really like the crab rangoon, because he would have stuck around if he did. So we have everything I could find about his character, aside from one final piece that I'll mention to kind of bring this to a conclusion. Was Pagan this hard-to-hate villain? I think it's easy to find a charm in his character because of his interaction with Ajay. Plus, Troy Baker is phenomenal, and I don't know if I'd hesitate to leave my wife for him, but that's beside the point. Yes, Pagan Min shows warmth and favors Ajay, but he's still a monster who fled a country, killed his way to the top of it, then stimulated their economy with heroin money, killed people who opposed him or didn't serve him in the way he wished to be pampered, and continued to disrespect and destroy the traditions and culture of the country. He has always been someone obsessed with power and how it can best be utilized to serve him in his desires. Going back to my theory of whether or not he shows Ajay warmth because he loved Ishwari or because it was this display of power. I can't say that this clarifies anything for sure, but it does give a bit more to think about. In the Control DLC, the conclusion you can draw is that he didn't really have a genuine love for his family, but he did love them. It's kind of like looking into the mind of a psychopath or a sociopath. It's like emotions aren't going to feel the same way, if that makes sense. But regardless, he did love his family. He just loved himself way more. He admitted to himself in the DLC that he used his daughter's death and Ishwari's leaving as an excuse to just keep doing what he wanted. The line between him showing warmth to Ajay out of love for his mother and out of the power it brought him is rather gray. And overall, defining the motives behind his attitude to Ajay isn't the purpose of this video. Rather, it's to disprove the approach that he's a character to be sympathized with, that he's the victim, that he's hard to hate. He is a power-hungry, selfish monster who has always loved himself more than anything else. Any and every interaction he has can be summarized by, "How can you serve me?" I think his passing on of the country to Ajay is a way of staying in power, because it would still be a part of him, a part of his past, controlling the country. Kind of drawing back to the comment in the comic. They will not remember how I took power, only what I did with it, and how long I kept it.